You ordered the wrong girl, the mail order bride cried. The single dad cowboy smiled. No, I ordered right. Wyoming Territory, 1887. The wind stirred dust across the main road of a small frontier town, where wooden storefronts lined the street like aging sentinels. The sun was barely past its peak, and at the edge of town, a worn-out stagecoach creaked to a halt beside the depot. Gentry Callahan stood tall and still, his broad shoulders casting a long shadow across the dirt. His wide-brimmed hat shaded a face carved by wind and loss. Standing beside him, his two children clutched wildflowers. Ellie, 6, with braids loose from the ride, and little Ben, only 3, clutching his sister's hand and a crumpled blue blossom. They waited. The door to the coach opened, and the last passenger stepped down. She wore a pale blue traveling dress, faded at the edges, her gloved hands trembling slightly as they held her modest valise. She was younger than Gentry expected, early 20s, maybe. Her face was soft, kind, but wrong. Not the one from the photo. Ellie stepped forward, holding out the flowers. "These are for you," she said with a wide smile, "because you are going to be our mama." The woman blinked, startled, then knelt to accept the flowers. "Thank you, sweetheart," she whispered. "They're beautiful." Gentry stepped forward slowly. His voice was low and steady, but distant. "Your name?" The woman stood up, nervous now. "Loretta Woodson." His jaw clenched. "That is not who I was told would be coming," he said plainly. "The photograph, the letters, they were not from you." Loretta lowered her eyes. "No, they were not." Gentry's face darkened. "So, who are you?" She swallowed hard. "The woman who was supposed to come. She changed her mind. I was staying in the same boarding house. The matchmaker needed a replacement quickly. She said you were kind, that you needed someone to look after your children. She gave me the train fare and her letters and told me to go." "You knew I was expecting someone else," he said flatly. "I did. You came anyway. I had nowhere else to go." Gentry exhaled through his nose, the dust swirling at his boots. He looked away for a long beat, then turned his back. "This was a mistake." "Please," she said softly. But he had already started walking. "Come on," he told his children. "We are leaving." Ellie glanced between the woman and her father. Ben hesitated, confused. Then both children began to follow, dragging their feet, glancing back. Ben tripped on a loose stone in the path. He fell hard, his small hands scraping the dirt, the flowers tumbling from his grip. He began to cry. Loretta dropped her bag and rushed to him without thinking. "Oh, baby, it's all right," she cooed, gathering him gently into her arms. "Shh, I've got you." She brushed the dirt from his palms, examined his knees, and pulled a clean handkerchief from her sleeve. With care, she wiped the smudges from his face, then reached into her coat pocket and pulled out a small piece of gingerbread wrapped in cloth. "I saved this," she whispered. "Would you like it?" Ben looked up at her through teary eyes, nodded slowly, and took the treat. Ellie walked back to them, watching quietly. She touched Loretta's arm. "You look like a real mama." Loretta's eyes shimmered, but she managed a smile. Gentry had stopped walking. He turned, he watched. The way she held Ben, the way Ellie touched her hand, the softness in her voice. None of that was in the photo. He walked back, his boots, quiet, in the dust. He stood in front of her, studied her face, then the way Ben leaned into her. "I think," he said slowly, the hardness slipping from his voice, "I ordered right." Loretta blinked, stunned. "I do not need a wife," he added, "but I need someone who can care for them, just for a while, 1 month, if you are willing." She looked from him to the children, then back again. "I am." They rode in silence toward the homestead, the wagon creaking over open land. Loretta sat between the children, humming softly. She began to teach them a song her grandmother used to sing, something about the moon and prairie flowers. Gentry kept his eyes on the road ahead, but every now and then he glanced sideways. And something in him, long buried, stirred. Loretta's new room was hardly a room at all, just a converted storage space at the end of the hallway, barely wide enough to hold a bed and a chest. The window was small, and the walls smelled faintly of dry wood and old grain, but Loretta did not complain. When Gentry opened the door and said simply, "This will be yours," she nodded and stepped inside without a word. He had called it the guest room, but the children had other ideas. "Are you sleeping in there, Mama Loretta?" Ellie asked, tugging at her hand. Gentry's brow furrowed. "She is not." But Loretta squeezed the girl's hand gently. "Yes, sweetie, just down the hall if you need anything." Ben clung to the hem of her dress and nodded solemnly, as if that settled it. To them, she already belonged. In the days that followed, Loretta quietly folded herself into the rhythms of the house. She rose before dawn to warm water on the stove and bake cornbread for breakfast. She patched a torn sleeve on Gentry's work shirt without being asked. When the children spilled flour or tracked in mud, she said nothing, only smiled, cleaned it up, and hummed a tune from back east. Gentry watched her from the porch, or across the table, or from the doorway, as she scrubbed dishes until they shone like glass. He had known prideful women, fragile women, flirtatious ones too. But this woman, this quiet, steady presence, was something else entirely. There was no desperation in her movements, no bitterness, just a kind of stillness, not the stillness of surrender, but of someone who had survived something and come through the other side. One night, the house was still save for the crackle of firewood in the hearth and the slow ticking of the clock. Gentry was halfway through a ledger when he heard a cry. "Ellie." He rose instinctively, but paused in the hallway. The child's door was already ajar. Loretta was there, her shadow cast long on the wooden floor. She moved gently, sitting on the edge of the girl's bed and brushing tangled hair from Ellie's damp forehead. "Bad dream?" she whispered. Ellie nodded, still sniffling. "I dreamed I lost Ben, and I could not find Mama." Loretta paused, smoothing the blanket. Then, in a soft voice, she began to hum, a tune unfamiliar to Gentry, melancholy, slow, a lullaby carried from somewhere far away. After a moment, Ellie asked, "Will my real Mama ever come back?" There was a long silence. Loretta did not rush to answer. Instead, she gathered Ellie into her arms, held her against her chest, and spoke just above a whisper. "Some people, they never truly leave us, even when we cannot see them anymore. But sometimes, sweetheart, God sends someone new, so our hearts do not stay empty forever." Gentry stood frozen in the hallway, one hand on the doorframe, his throat tight. When Ellie finally drifted off, Loretta remained beside her for a while, staring into the dark. Her hand rested over the girl's small back, but her eyes were distant, as if she were singing herself to sleep too. Later that night, Loretta sat alone in her little room. The candle beside her flickered low. She opened the satchel that held all she owned, reached inside, and pulled out an old, folded letter, creased and stained from too many readings. She read it again, though she already knew every word. "Loretta, I cannot go through with it. My mother forbids it. Please do not be angry. I hope you find peace somewhere." She folded it back carefully, placed it beneath her pillow, and sat in silence. She had once worked in a tailor's shop in Missouri. Long hours, quiet corners, polite smiles. The son of the shop owner had taken an interest in her. At first, she thought it was kindness. Then, affection. Then, love. He had promised her a home, a future. They had planned to leave town and start over in Colorado. But when his mother discovered the affair, Loretta was cast out. No warning, no defense. He did not fight for her. He did not even show up to say goodbye. With no family, no job, and no roof over her head, she had done what many desperate women did. She answered a letter. Not out of romance. Out of necessity. She never expected love. But she had hoped, just once, not to be left behind. Down the hallway, Gentry still stood outside the children's room, unable to move. Her words echoed in his mind. Sometimes God sends someone new. He did not know if she was meant to be here. But for the first time in 3 years, he felt something in his chest uncoil. That night, Gentry slept. And he did not dream. Morning broke, bright and clear, the kind of golden day that made even the dust glow. The Callahan homestead stirred to life slowly, roosters crowing, wind tapping against the windows, the scent of wood smoke curling from the chimney. Inside the kitchen, laughter echoed. Flour coated the pine table, the floorboards, and even the hem of Loretta's apron. Ben, balanced on a stool, slapped dough with tiny, enthusiastic hands. Ellie stood beside her, face smudged, shaping biscuits with intense focus. "You both are natural bakers," Loretta smiled, guiding Ben's hands more gently. "But next time, maybe less flour in your hair." The boy giggled, dropping more onto the floor just to see her reaction. From the front door, Gentry entered, brushing dirt from his coat after tending the livestock. He paused in the doorway, one eyebrow lifting as he took in the scene, his kitchen, now completely overtaken by children, dough, and soft singing. "Is this breakfast or a flower storm?" Loretta looked up, face flushed but laughing. "Both, I suppose." Gentry opened his mouth to say something stern, something about messes and wasted flour, but it died before reaching his lips. Because he saw something else. He saw Ben nestled against her hip, covered in powder and joy. He saw Ellie looking up at Loretta with open trust, mimicking her every move. And he saw Loretta, her sleeves rolled, her smile unguarded, more alive than he had yet seen her. He chuckled, quiet, unexpected. It was the first time in a long while anyone in that house had laughed just to laugh. Later that afternoon, Gentry returned from the barn to find the children seated at the table, hunched over paper and colored chalks. Loretta was sweeping nearby, letting them create without interference. Ben held up his drawing proudly. "Daddy, look." Gentry took the crumpled page. 4 stick figures stood beneath a crooked sun, one tall, 2 small, and one with a long dress and yellow hair. Scrawled at the bottom in Ellie's careful hand, "Me, Ben, Daddy, Mommy Loretta." He blinked. Ellie beamed. "Do you like it? We made it for the wall." Before he could respond, she ran to the kitchen, snatched a nail from the drawer, and with Loretta's help, pinned the paper beside the fireplace. It hung there, wobbly, bright, impossibly innocent. Gentry stood staring at it long after the children had gone to wash up. Loretta moved beside him, drying her hands on a towel, watching his face. He did not speak. Instead, he reached up, pulled the drawing from the wall carefully, and held it for a moment in his hand. Then he turned and walked toward the back room. In his bedroom, he opened the top drawer of a wooden chest, hesitated, then slid the drawing inside, between 2 folded shirts, where no one would see it but him. He came back out to find Loretta waiting. Her voice was tentative. Did I do something wrong? He looked at her, and the answer was too tangled to name. No, she had not done wrong. But something about that picture, about the word "mommy" next to her name, unsettled him. Not because it was untrue, but because it felt dangerously close to something he had sworn never to hope for again. He shook his head slowly. "You did nothing wrong," he said. "It is just, I am not ready, that is all." Loretta nodded. "I understand." She turned back to the sink, quietly humming again, the tune gentle and low. Gentry stood still for a moment longer, then stepped outside, needing the open air more than he could admit. The breeze carried her voice after him, a melody that made his chest ache, even as he tried to forget why. Clouds had gathered through the late afternoon, slow and heavy. By dusk, the sky broke open. Rain fell in torrents, sharp as nails, driven sideways by the wind. The storm came fast and hard. No warning, no mercy. Thunder cracked as Gentry wrestled the barn doors shut. The smaller coop near the back of the property groaned under the weight of water, and when lightning split the sky, he saw the chicken pen roof bow inward, one side already giving way. He cursed under his breath and grabbed a tarp. "Stay inside," he shouted over his shoulder, knowing Loretta would be listening. But when he reached the broken coop, sloshing through ankle-deep mud, she was already there. Soaked through, skirts plastered to her legs, she held one edge of the tarp and was guiding the last of the frantic hens into the corner. "You should be inside," he barked. "So should you," she snapped back, not looking at him. A gust of wind caught the tarp, nearly wrenching it from her grip. He moved fast to help her, hands working quickly, tying the corners down with rope. Rain battered them, thunder rolling above like distant cannon fire. Loretta reached up to adjust the far end when her boot slipped in the muck. She went down hard. Gentry caught her before she hit the ground, arms wrapping around her waist in a reflex older than thought. She clutched his coat, breathing fast, hair soaked and clinging to her face. Their eyes met, close, too close. Rain poured down around them, but for a heartbeat, time stilled. Then, he blinked, jaw tightening. He let go, stepping back. "Be careful," he said, almost too quietly. She nodded, not trusting her voice. They finished the work in silence, side by side beneath the storm. By the time they came back into the house, Loretta was shivering. She tried to wave him off, brushing water from her shoulders, but Gentry pointed toward the chair by the fire. "Sit." She did. He stoked the flames higher, then disappeared into the kitchen. A few minutes later, he returned with a steaming mug. "Drink this." She took it. "Hot water with honey and ginger." "Thank you," she murmured, surprised. He sat across from her, but said nothing. The firelight flickered, casting shadows that danced across his face, softening the lines around his mouth. "I will be fine," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I know." He watched her sip the drink slowly. Her hands were still trembling, though not from the cold anymore. Gentry looked away first. He stood, walked to the door, and paused. "If you need anything tonight." She looked up at him, brows lifted. He cleared his throat. "You can knock." Their eyes held for a breath longer than necessary. Then he was gone. She sat in the quiet for a long while after that, mug warm in her palms, the storm easing outside. Somewhere deep inside her chest, something small and aching stirred. And upstairs, lying awake in the dark, Gentry stared at the ceiling, listening to the rain soften into a whisper. He could still feel her in his arms. And he hated how much he wished he had not let go. The fire had burned low, leaving only amber coals glowing in the hearth. The children had long gone to bed, their soft breathing a steady rhythm through the quiet of the house. Loretta sat at the edge of the hearth, a patch of mending in her lap, though her needle had stilled. Gentry was across the room, leaning back in his chair, boots planted firmly on the floor, arms crossed. The silence between them was not uncomfortable, just full of unsaid things. Loretta looked up, hesitating. Her voice was gentle when it came. "Do you mind if I ask about her?" His eyes flicked toward her. "Her. Your wife." For a moment, he said nothing. The logs shifted in the fireplace. Then he nodded once, as if giving himself permission. Her name was Clara. He did not look at Loretta as he spoke, eyes fixed on the dying fire. She had a laugh that made people turn their heads, not because it was loud, but because it made you want to hear it again. She grew up near the river towns, loved reading more than cooking, thought chickens were the devil. A corner of his mouth lifted faintly, but it did not reach his eyes. She got sick the second winter after Ben was born. Fever came on fast. Malaria, they said. Nothing we could do. No doctor nearby. He stopped, jaw clenched. I was out hunting, trying to bring back meat before the snow hit hard. By the time I got back, his voice cracked, barely a breath now. She was already gone. Loretta sat very still, the patch of fabric falling from her lap. Her heart ached with the weight of his words. "I buried her on the South Hill," Gentry continued. "Next to the willow she liked. I go out there sometimes, but not often enough. I tell myself it is because of the work, the kids. Truth is, I do not know if I go for her or for me." He leaned forward, resting his elbows on his knees, head bowed. "I blamed myself, still do some days. Thought if I had been quicker, smarter, stayed instead of leaving. But life out here," he exhaled sharply. "It does not wait for you to feel ready." A long silence followed. Loretta reached out, slow and steady, placing her hand lightly on top of his. Her touch was soft, not pressing, just present. Gentry froze. Then he pulled his hand back, almost too quickly. His eyes flickered up to meet hers, then darted away again. "I am afraid," he said quietly. "Afraid if I let myself love again, I will lose her too. And I do not know if I could survive that twice." Loretta's hand lowered to her lap. She did not flinch or frown. She only nodded, once, and began to gather her sewing. "I understand," she said. And she did, because she too had loved once, and been left in the cold. She stood, folding the fabric neatly, her back straight, her movements calm. She did not push, did not ask for more. She had seen what he was not ready to give. Before leaving the room, she looked at him one last time. "You are not alone in that fear, Gentry." Then she walked away, leaving him in the glow of the coals, with only his breath and the memory of a hand that had not tried to hold on, but simply offered to stay. The morning had started like any other. Cool air, sun breaking through the clouds, chickens scratching in the yard. Gentry had taken the children to check the fence line, and Loretta was kneading bread dough by the window, her sleeves rolled, hair pinned back in its usual simple knot. She did not notice the man approaching on horseback until the dog barked. By the time she stepped outside, wiping her hands on her apron, he was already tying off the reins and removing his hat. He was thin, middle-aged, with the look of someone who traveled often and smiled rarely. "Good morning, ma'am," he said, tipping his head politely. "Name's Hollis. I am with the matrimonial registry out of Street Lewis." Loretta's heart dropped. She stepped out onto the porch. "What brings you here?" "I am looking for a Loretta Woodson," he said. "Heard she was matched with a Mr. Callahan up this way. Thought I'd check on how things went. Last I heard she was still trying to find a proper match after the Kansas man backed out. The words hit like cold water. Behind them, boots crunched against the dirt. Gentry had returned. He stood several paces away, holding Ben by the hand and Ellie by the shoulder, his eyes locked on Hollis. "What did you say?" he asked flatly. The man glanced between them. "Just sayin' this young lady here was promised to another fella a few months back. Fella changed his mind. She came to us again, said she'd go anywhere we'd send her." Gentry's jaw tensed. "She did not mention that." "Well," Hollis shrugged, "some folks would rather not talk about the parts that make 'em look thrown away." Loretta's voice was low but firm. "That is enough." Gentry turned to her. His face was unreadable. "Is it true?" he asked. She nodded, slow and quiet. "It is." "Why did you not say anything?" "Because I thought it would not matter," she said. "Because I was trying to start over." He looked at her for a long time, too long. The weight of silence stretched between them. Then he said, voice cold and even, "You are a good woman, Loretta. But I cannot, will not, let my children get attached to someone who does not want to be here. Someone who might leave." Loretta opened her mouth to speak, but nothing came. Gentry turned to the children. "Go inside." Ellie hesitated, glancing up at Loretta with wide, unsure eyes, but Gentry's tone allowed no argument. She took Ben's hand and led him into the house. Loretta stood motionless, the wind tugging at her skirt. "I did not come here to lie," she whispered. Gentry did not reply. The man named Hollis cleared his throat awkwardly and walked back to his horse. Loretta remained on the porch until the sound of hoofbeats faded into the distance. That night, she packed her things in silence. Her bag was small. It had always been small. She folded the dresses she had mended, the letter she had once read so many times, the handkerchief Ellie had used to tie her braid. She held that one a little longer before setting it gently on top. In the quiet of her room, she sat on the edge of the bed and stared at the door. No one knocked. And for the first time since she arrived, the house felt cold. The sun had barely crested the hills when Loretta stepped out onto the porch, carpetbag in hand. The air was crisp, filled with the scent of dew and dust, and the sky was a soft gray, as if the world itself was holding its breath. She had hoped to slip away quietly. The last thing she wanted was goodbyes. But as her boots hit the ground, a small voice broke through the stillness. "Where are you going?" She turned. Ellie stood in the doorway, hair tousled from sleep, holding something behind her back. Ben stood beside her, eyes wide, already brimming with tears. Loretta forced a smile. "I have to go, sweetheart." "Why?" Ellie stepped closer. "Did Daddy tell you to?" Loretta crouched down, placing the bag at her feet. "No, it is just time." Ben ran to her then, wrapping his arms around her leg, burying his face in her skirt. "Please do not go," he cried. "You said you would stay." Loretta's hands trembled as she stroked his hair. "I know," she whispered. "I am sorry." Ellie walked the last few steps and held out the paper she had been hiding. It was the drawing, the one with all four of them beneath a yellow sun. But now, the crayon that had once drawn Loretta's dress had been erased, smeared away. Only 3 figures remained. "We fixed it," Ellie said, her voice shaking, "so you do not have to pretend anymore." Loretta's breath hitched. Tears slipped down her cheeks as she pulled both children into her arms. They clung to her tightly, little hands gripping her dress, her arms, her shoulders, anything to keep her there. "I do not want to go," she sobbed, pressing her face into Ellie's hair. I thought it was what he wanted." Behind them, a door creaked open. Gentry stood on the steps, shirt sleeves rolled, eyes dark and unreadable. He had not slept. In his hand, he held a small velvet pouch. He watched them for a long moment, then slowly descended the steps, stopping just a few feet away. Loretta looked up, brushing tears from her face. "I was going to leave quietly," she said. "I know, quote, I did not mean to get in the way." "You didn't." He opened the pouch and drew out a simple gold band, thin, weathered, the inside dulled by time. It was his late wife's wedding ring. "I kept this," he said softly, "because I thought I would never find someone who could fill that place. Someone I could trust. For the kids, for myself." He looked down at the ring, then slowly closed his fist around it. "I thought I needed a mother for them. That was the whole reason I wrote those letters. But then you came, and it wasn't just them you took care of." He met her eyes. "You sat beside me when I would not speak. You listened without demanding. You stayed up with my children when they cried, and when you thought I would not choose you, you still protected their hearts." He opened his other hand. A second ring lay in his palm, new, plain, but chosen. "For a long time, I lived afraid of love," he said, "but now, I am more afraid of letting it walk away." He knelt, the dirt soft beneath his knee. "This is not about the children," he said, "not anymore." He held out the ring. "This time, it is because I choose you." Loretta stared at him, her lips trembling, the morning light catching in her eyes. And as the children watched, silent, breathless, she reached out and took his hand. The late afternoon sun spilled gold across the open fields behind the Callahan homestead. A soft breeze stirred the prairie grass, carrying the scent of wildflowers and fresh earth. Beneath the tall cottonwood tree just beyond the barn, a few wooden chairs had been arranged in a semicircle, their guests few but dear, neighbors who had lent tools, shared stories, or helped bury Clara. There was no organ, no lace, no grand procession. Only honesty and love. Loretta stood beneath the tree in a dress she had sewn herself. White cotton, simple and clean, cinched with a ribbon the color of sage. Her hair was braided with wildflowers. Ellie's idea. Her hands, clasped in front of her, trembled just slightly. Gentry stood waiting, his boots dusted, his shirt collar freshly pressed. He had shaved that morning, the first time in months. His eyes never left hers. Ellie and Ben walked ahead of her, each carrying a small bouquet of yellow daisies and bluebells they had picked from the meadow. Ben had dropped his twice, and Ellie had helped him pick them up again each time. They stood to either side of the tree now, grinning, fidgeting, hearts too full to keep still. The preacher cleared his throat, the book resting lightly in his hands. He kept his words short, just enough scripture to sanctify, but not so much as to interrupt the quiet holiness already present. Then he looked to Gentry. "You may speak your vow." Gentry turned to Loretta, his voice low and certain. "I have lived in silence, in shadow, in fear that love would come and cost me again." He reached for her hands. "But then you arrived, not loud, not demanding, just here, and everything began to breathe again." He glanced briefly toward the children, who were watching with wide eyes and proud hearts. "This time," he said, voice catching just slightly, "I ordered right, not a bride, a home." Loretta blinked back tears, her voice soft. "And I came thinking I was someone's last choice, a replacement, a mistake." She smiled, steady now. "But you and these children, you showed me I was never a burden. I was always meant to belong somewhere. And now, I do." The preacher nodded. "With the power vested in me, I pronounce you husband and wife." There was no applause, just a stillness, a reverent kind of joy. Gentry leaned forward and kissed her, gentle and sure. The children clapped, Ellie bouncing on her toes. Ben ran forward, hugging them both at once, arms too small to wrap around but determined to try. That evening, as the sun lowered to kiss the horizon, painting the sky in strokes of honey and rose, the four of them rode together across the prairie. Gentry on his horse, Loretta behind him, arms around his waist. Ellie and Ben rode side saddle on a pony, laughing every time it trotted faster than expected. No words were spoken. They did not need them. The land rolled out before them, open, wide, waiting. And as the wind played in Loretta's hair, her voice drifted softly, like a prayer carried on air. I came here thinking I was someone's last hope. She looked ahead, toward the rising stars. But it turns out, I was the right one all along. Thank you for riding with us through this unforgettable tale of second chances, soft strength, and love that grows where no one thought it could. If Loretta and Gentry's story touched your heart, if it made you believe, even just a little, that love can rise from dust and disappointment, then go ahead and tap that like button. It lets us know you want more stories like this one. And if you have not already, subscribe to Wild West Love Stories and ring that bell so you never miss a single heartbeat from the